Hello, and welcome to Tycoon Talks. I'm your host, Chloe, running strategic partnerships here at Database Tycoon. And I'm joined here by our founder and CEO, Steven, and our very special guest, David Yaffe, the co-founder and CEO of Estuary. And this is a very special episode because it is our 1-year anniversary. So a year ago, we debuted our very first Tycoon Talks episode with Dani Palma from Estuary. So it's fitting that we would bring Estuary back on for our year anniversary. And David, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're building at Estuary.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And so I'm Dave, the CEO of Estuary. We are a right-time data platform. So what we mean by that is we help companies who have data in various different places connect it and with whatever latency that they want to destination systems of their choice. We do the whole ETL part where it could be capturing data from maybe a Postgres data and pushing it with millisecond latency to an operational system like Kafka, or just doing some analytics with Snowflake and pushing it every 4 hours. And so we make that whole process into end very, very simple in a single platform.
Awesome. And I guess let's take it back to the beginning. Like when you were founding Estuary, like what problem were you seeing in the data world that motivated you to build Estuary? And like, why did it feel important enough to commit to as a founder?
It's an interesting question. Our solution here goes way back to our own problems that we had when we built it. Myself and my co-founder built another company. We built a company called Arbor, and we built that back in like 2016, so quite a while ago at this point. And what we were seeing there was that we wanted to have a platform that could help us with being able to do our own internal analytics for things like BI, creating our reporting stack, reporting billing to customers, and also even powering our own like data platform, our data processing. Meaning, what I mean by that is we created a platform that made it possible to sync data to lots of different destination systems, and that was our product, right? Data as a product, and so that had to be in real time. And we said, like, why do we have to use two different things to solve this problem for ourselves? We really don't want to maintain Kafka and also have to create an analytics system ourselves. What if we could have a single pipeline that helps with that? So we did a really weird and non-standard thing. We built a system called Gazette that actually does that. It's an open source streaming system that works with batch data as well. That's available today. It has a lot of production users on it. So we built and sold that company and back to a public company called LiveRamp. And afterwards, my co-founder approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to take this thing and try to make a company around it?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, we had a problem that it solved, so let's talk to a whole bunch of businesses and see if they have that same problem." So that's what led us to start Estuary. We did that in 2020, and kind of took a little time bringing it to market, turning it into a platform that is fully automated and works for enterprise type security and all that stuff. But that was the core problem that we had.
David, from your perspective over the last year, like what stood out in terms of like the broader data landscape and inside Estuary?
There's so much. I mean, this year has been one of the biggest years for data in general, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen everything from consolidation of this whole modern data stack, players coming together, and kind of a big question around like what is the future of the modern data stack? And I think that's just like one part of it, right? Like that's led to a bit of uncertainty. But on top of that, just the technology has shifted so much where we've brought in AI to what even data teams are thinking about now, and problems that they're trying to solve. And I think that there's a whole bunch of opportunity around that, or like new things that I think data teams are probably just like starting to dip their toes in and going to get really pulled in over the next couple of years. So I'm excited about that. That's really what I've had my eyes on. It's an interesting trend, especially for like a right time data platform for like us. Just because obviously that kind of brings in a little bit more real time use cases to modern data stack as well. So that's what I would say. For us, we had a really big year as well. So We raised the Series A. That's always fun. And we've hit what I would call with product maturity across a bunch of different use cases. We have, now 300 customers across, all different locations, doubled the team, quadrupled our revenue, just a really milestone year for us.
And Stephen, I would like to get your take on this too.
We're very aware here about the changes in the modern data stack as well, and we're trying to observe what the consolidation means for not only our customers, but for other practitioners in the field, and just trying to understand, which companies are bringing tools together in a way that we think will be productive and helpful to the industry. And then, the more maybe risky consolidation that could be happening where, some companies buy other companies and suddenly you don't know what's happening with the product anymore, or like a service that was being supported that's no longer being supported. So, we're just trying to ride the waves of the changes here and just kind of make the best suggestions we can for our customers. In the meantime, we're trying to grow the team as much as we can and try to, bring on new clients when we can and think about what we're offering here as a business. So it's been very exciting from our side as well.
And David, what, in your opinion, convinces a team that the freshness of their data, when we're talking about real-time data, is becoming an actual constraint on what they want to build and operate? Like, is there some specific moment that becomes like the turning point where the customer now is needing real-time data?
So this has been a journey, and it's really changing. My answer, I think, if you asked me the same question a year ago, would be very different than what it is today. And so when we first started the business, there was a real divide where engineering teams would care about creating products, and those products usually had a customer in the loop, and that customer in the loop was the definition of what drove the need for real-time data, right? Like, you want to react to something. A customer doesn't want to wait to see when you click a button that something happens in their view. So that's what we saw classically. And then on the other side, analytics was the side, BI, that's the side where batch data would be important. I think what we've seen is that over the past year, new people through the adoption of AI have been able to do applications like these. So we see a whole set of new users that are empowered now through the tools that they're using to be able to solve problems that were classically engineering problems. And that's led to a new situation where freshness is important for a much broader variety of people. So where we used to sell something to two different groups, would sell to an engineering group, one product, and to maybe an analytics group, another product, or a data group, and another product. Nowadays, we're seeing a crossover of use cases between the two groups more and more. And that's really the biggest thing that's led to it becoming a constraint. The use cases are kind of converging. The people who are solving the different use cases are converging as well.
And so I guess kind of like with these like groups converging, right? It's like what feels solved and complete, and where does this real like complexity live?
I think what we see is that there's a lot of like more commodity problems that have now been solved. Maybe one framing to look at it is, if you can buy a tool off the shelf to solve the problem, it's solved. You don't need to solve it internally, really. What's still really difficult, I would say, is solving the more business related problems. Understanding, if you have like a big enterprise, understanding how fields or how products work with each other, how they intermingle. If I have like a customer column in a product database that I have, how does that relate to Stripe or Salesforce or all the other systems that are connected? And how do I join them? What's the way? What does it mean when I do that? Those types of problems, I think, are still needed. Like, humans are needed to solve them, and you need to talk to people internally to teach them.
I want to kind of jump off that question a bit and ask you a little bit about AI and how you're approaching that at Estuary, because I know that that's having an impact on how all of us work at some level. And to your point about some of those unanswered questions about, connecting two tables to each other, like connecting a single field and two tables together, or just in general making meaningful insights about data without having much guidance. Do you? I generally, agree that we're going to be humans doing that work for a long time. But on the other hand, I do see LLMs and services like Claude Codes and things really catching up quite well to some of these tasks. I'm just curious, how do you see, I'm thinking of Estuary as like a company that essentially builds connectors and software. Like, how do you see AI helping you on that front? And do you see AI as a threat in any way, in that people might be able to start doing this more on their own?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's a lot to unpack, but AI helps all software companies if they should be using it. And so I actually, my co-founder is our CTO, and I love to talk to him about this because his perspective is amazing to me. He says that he gets about a 2x increase in productivity from AI. And the way that he uses it is he essentially has Claude take a first pass, or probably other LLMs as well, take a first pass at any problem he's trying to solve. And then he reads every single line of it and kind of changes every single line, most likely. But that first pass that's called solving the cold start problem is incredibly impactful, right? Like it's saying, oh, this is one possible way to implement this thing. And so for a very experienced engineer, it can be really impactful because you can just solve that blank canvas problem and get something going. But I think there's risk in like just taking what it produces and using that, right? Like in a production system, that's not going to be maintainable. It's not going to match with your other code that's out there. No one's going to know how to use it when something goes wrong, and just like going to cause lots and lots of issues and problems over the long term. But so that's, how I think we look at that for solving our own product building use cases. It comes into every part of the business, to be honest, right? Like from a support perspective, we're trying to do as much as we can with it. From a customer enablement perspective, we're doing the same. We're implementing it into our product to help with creating transformations and to create pipelines and maintain those pipelines and edit them and do like mundane tasks like that you don't necessarily need to be in a UI clicking around to actually do. So there's a lot of ways that we're using it. And I think over the next year, we hope to enable users to even build their own connectors using it. And so you can come in and then you can say, hey, Claude, I want to build a connector to this system. Can you write me a draft of it? And it'll write you some Python that we can run for you. So tons of different ways. I'm just scratching the surface of how we're thinking about it right now. But, and of course, I think that any system right now, any company right now has the risk of being disintermediated. We're at like an existential threat to every business system place, and this is just something that, like, if you're not thinking about that, you're gonna fall behind and you're gonna get replaced. I do think that connectors in general are pretty difficult to fully automate, and it's because we've tried it. So, like, we want to be doing that. We want to like use AI to automate connectors to build thousands of them to every systems, and it's hard because the documentation is terrible. Right? None of these actually document how they work. B, you really need to use AI successfully. I think you need a proof. Like, you need a capability to know exactly what should come out of the system and tell the LLM to check its own work. And that doesn't exist without documentation or without like a really good human advisor to help the LLM at this point, at least. I think over time, that's going to change, and really building the system that bounds the LLM and tells it how to check its own work. And that's the trick here. That's how you make the LLM successful at doing this type of thing. But that's a lot of work, right? Like, it's not going to just happen on its own. And so hopefully we're well positioned to make that.
Yeah, sounds great. And I think having ideas like, people who can kind of use LLMs to create their own ingestion scripts within the Estuary platform, it's a nice way to meet customers halfway, where they can still do the LLM development work that they'd like to do, but also they don't have to think about all the infrastructure, all the logging, all the alerting, all those underrated things that, if you're using a SaaS platform like Estuary, you don't have to worry about them as much. And if you're spinning something up with your own LLM, you do. And, it's that same age-old question of like, are you prepared to run everything open source yourself, or do you need some support from a vendor? And I think for a lot of companies, the answer, even years into the LLM, revolution or whatever you want to call it, I think they're still going to be needing, support like this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And the funny thing is, it almost changes as companies get bigger. The bigger the enterprise, the more likely they are, in most cases, this isn't in all cases, of course, but the more likely they are to not want to build it in-house because they know how much pain it can be to actually maintain that over the long term, and how frequently you have turnover of people who understand systems that built them. And, you kind of want to pay someone to do something for you. And so I think that stays over time here, at least for, I don't think anyone can predict 2 years out anymore. So we'll see what happens.
It's impossible.
And that kind of brings me to, the post that you have pinned on your LinkedIn, you shared this really cool way of thinking about the data stack in terms of capture, transport, operational transforms, analytic transforms, etc. Like, what parts of that mental model that you mapped out still hold up today, and where does that model start to break down once companies try to build real products and automation, like as you guys were saying, and AI on top of their data?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So what we're seeing is a push that I'll just give you another example. I wrote another LinkedIn post today. And so that post was about the fact that a lot of companies out there today are now, who are previously mostly analytics focused. So think of like Snowflake, ClickHouse. They're now also offering a managed Postgres service. And so, if they're doing that, that's a very operational use case, right? Like an OLTP system is something that powers production use cases. And so there's a desire to cross over between the two, at least on the vendor side of things. And I think a belief that that's going to be important because of LLMs. Databricks explicitly said that the reason they bought Neon was that, so that they could empower these types of LLM use cases. And I think that is going to happen, and it is sort of happening already. So, that means that my post probably has aged and it needs a revision. So I should really come up with a new one. Interestingly, I don't know if it's going to be that we have, one system that does both analytics and operational use cases. Interestingly, you look at like Snowflake. Snowflake has, what's it called? They have hybrid tables, right? Hybrid tables are supposed to be being able to handle both types of workloads, a transactional and a OLAP workload in a single table. And so that is a take at, unifying analytics and operational workloads in a single place. I don't know if that's the way that's going to end up being successful, or if it's just, a single vendor manages both an OLAP and an OLTP system. I think probably the latter, if I'm guessing, just because I don't think there's really too much market demand for a single destination that can serve both, and there's a lot of trade-offs that actually end up being made there. But we'll see. I think that's a good question to watch.
What was the LLM use case? I think I missed that from the post.
So the LLM use case that Databricks talked about is that Databricks they're using an LLM to help them spin up a local database using Neon, because Neon has like good pricing and stuff, to accomplish an operational use case. So it's actually a capability to, I want to create a production database that powers my app or something along those lines. Can you create me this app that I can host on the web, powered by production database that does this and this and this? And you tell the LLM that it reaches for Neon, it sets up a Neon database for you, and then powers it from that. So it kind of makes sense.
So you can use your analytics infrastructure to inform like what should be happening on the operational side, vice versa?
I think so. I mean, Databricks is not just analytics, because they're kind of Spark and all that stuff too, but and you have a lot of engineers that are using Databricks as well because of that. So yeah, I think that's some of the idea. I know that Supabase had this concept where they announced a huge amount of growth, and it was because LLMs were reaching for Supabase to basically set up their applications where people were making new applications. And so I assume that that's the same thing that Databricks is trying to do with Neon there.
Yeah. Just broadly on this, I think something that I'm noticing in the data industry in the last 2 or 3 years that didn't seem to exist before is it's getting a lot easier to just run arbitrary stuff on various platforms. And this example you brought up of the Postgres, Databricks and Snowflake both buying Postgres hosting companies so that they can import that into their tool, certainly seems like they're thinking that way. And I think in the practical sense, when I work with clients, at the end of the day, a lot of this just comes down to a chicken and egg problem almost of, what was there first? Because I think that in reality, you'd find that a lot of teams would be hard pressed if they already have a Postgres instance supporting their app. It's probably going to take a lot of convincing to switch them to migrate that into Snowflake. However, if you're starting totally from scratch and that's the direction you want to go from the beginning, it seems really advantageous to just have Snowflake, maybe as an example, be the first vendor for Databricks and just set up both of your databases there and then just go ahead with it. I can certainly see that usage growing more in the future, but I haven't really seen that use case get used fully just yet.
Yeah, it feels, putting it in a slightly different way, it almost feels like it's aimed at startups or SMBs. It's not really aimed at enterprises to take away their Postgres business from AWS and GCP.
Yeah.
What is really exciting you about the industry right now that has nothing to do with LLMs or AI? What human advancements are you seeing right now?
That's a great question. You want to take it first, Steve, or should I?
Why don't you take a stab at it?
I think it's maybe not the most exciting thing happening right now, but what I'm pretty interested in is seeing the way that the other side of the data stack, the iceberg, the data warehouse itself is starting to be decoupled in a way that I kind of didn't expect to see happen. And it started out as a few people excited about Iceberg. And I was I don't really get this yet. And then I went to Mother Duck's conference and saw what they're doing with Doubleclick. And I'm starting to see the appeal of this, where you have, instead of just one warehouse that can handle everything, you have a compute layer, a query layer, you have your data storage separate, and you have more control over those things. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, how to truly take advantage of this decoupling that we're seeing. But at a time when it feels like the entire rest of the stack is consolidating to some extent, it's interesting to me that this part of the stack, which to me always felt like very nuanced data engineering stuff, has now really exploded and has become decoupled in a way that is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. It's also really cool that we can now have different query layers for different jobs, but on the same data set. And I think that the power of that is actually surprising. One of the things that you hear about all the time is Doubleclick and how powerful DuckDB is as a query service on smaller data sets, how much faster it is and more efficient than a lot of others. And so, we do see that and see a ton of use cases around doing that and using that for certain applications while pointing Snowflake or pointing, other query engines at your data set. So it's definitely something we see. I think from my standpoint, I'm uniquely going to be answering this in a way that is streaming focused. We've been talking about streaming for 5 years, and this company, and this year is the year that everyone cares about it. I really do believe that, right? Everyone's sort of offering features that really work well for streaming. Stuff did the stovepipe streaming, and they launched their V2, which is super fast and really great. And just seeing a ton of demand for that from lots of different customers that have actually fast use cases. So it's really nice to see everything kind of flip on its head a little bit in that way too.
And just kind of riffing off of that, and so kind of along with the push towards streaming, I noticed that you've started to use the phrase right time data movement instead of real time, which we were talking about earlier. And I guess from this, what exact distinction are you trying to make here?
So we did rebrand ourselves as the right time data platform. And we did that because not just for marketing purposes. We've always believed in this. This is the reason that we started the company, but we finally came up with the right phrasing this year for it. What we mean by right time is that we are a platform that works with both streaming and batch data without you having to think too hard about what to do. The single button, you can choose between what you want to do. And going back to what I was saying at the beginning, what we originally saw was this huge divide between engineering use cases and analytics use cases, but that wall's totally breaking down now. And what I think is really important for most teams is to be, yes, maybe you're just doing analytics right now, but you should be empowering yourself for your future use cases as well, especially now that they're advancing so fast and becoming so easy to use, right? Like taking your current data set that you're only doing analytics initiatives with, and then adding AI initiatives, and maybe even thinking about empowering yourself to do human in the loop customer experience initiatives as well. That should be something that you don't have to re-platform for in this day and age. And so that's really the goal. That's what we want by it.
I just want to kind of drill in a little bit on something you said earlier about kind of this being the year for streaming. And you mentioned there's like products, Snowflake has the Snowpipe integration, but what are some other tools that you think are uniquely like equipped for streaming data and tools that you've seen work well with Estuary?
Yeah, so single store is a really good one. So one of the things that we launched this year was our decaf. Decaf is Kafka without Kafka. So you can use us and then pretend we're Kafka. And so we can connect to lots of different destination systems like ClickHouse or Single Store and Materialize. We don't have to have a direct integration with them. We can just use our Kafka for that. And that's been pretty powerful because it allows us to work, for instance, with Single Store and provide a millisecond latency loading into Single Store at very, very high scale. And so, I think a lot of different companies have this type of means of working. ClickHouse is ClickPipes, which allows for Kafka loading, Materialize, and everyone else basically too. And so that's really one of the biggest problems historically with that type of loading is that it doesn't handle merge queries, right? Like you can't actually do merges, and there's a separate process that slows everything down to merge the data after the fact. But that's not really the case anymore with a lot of these platforms. So things like Single Store or ClickHouse, they do handle merges and they make it really possible and easy to do that downstream without much effort. Same thing with Tinybird, for instance, and just a ton of platforms that work in a similar way.
In terms of like your customer experience, what has surprised you the most about like their relationship to what you're building?
So that's a really good question. What we've seen is just like the capability to embrace this concept of a right time data platform without realizing that they were going into it. Like a lot of the times we'll actually sell to the analytics team and they'll say, yeah, I don't need that real time stuff. Like all I want is the capability to essentially schedule jobs every hour or two or four or whatever. And that's all that people are looking at it. So that's really it. So inevitably what we see is that 2, 3, 6 months later, there's a conversation internally where someone's like mentions a use case and a light bulb goes off and they think, yeah, I can totally do that and accomplish it here. And that's been really nice. When that happens, we get, we hit this like really big proponent situation where they start being really excited about the technology. And so for me, that's been the most surprising thing, just because, we thought we were selling analytics and with something that's a little bit more than that. So that's probably it. There's probably a lot more that I could say there, but that's what comes to the top of my mind.
Yeah, I'll answer on this too. I mean, the first thing that I'm thinking about with this is whenever I work with a client, regardless of what type of project it is, there's always going to be some amount of data infrastructure that me and my team are going to create and we're going to hand over to them and their team. And something I'm always sort of gauging for is how invested the receiving team is on that infrastructure that they're getting, because a lot of the tools we work with, including Estuary, if done well, they don't make a lot of noise because they just work silently and they get the job done. And so one way of pitching a data stack to a team is like, here's your data stack. It's built. It's going to load your data. Congratulations. But you're leaving out all the details of like what code was written to put all the pieces together and what tests are in place and a whole number of things that, anyone who's working with the stack can get invested into to whatever level they decide they want to. So I always really enjoy working with clients when I know that like I've set up a tool for them and they log in or they download it from GitHub and they explore and they try to understand like what's really making it work. And in the best case scenario, calling out the edge cases that I have not thought of about how their business works. They might say, oh, we have another vendor or another supplier and they don't use system A, that you have connected to our data ingestion. That means that your data set is not going to be complete and you need to have another ingestion for that tool. So once I feel like once I get into that rhythm with a client, it becomes much easier to kind of make iterations and improve on the data stack.
Kind of feels like you need to ask them a lot of questions to figure out the right people to talk to internally to answer those questions. That feels like a really hard problem and probably the hardest problem that you're solving in your job at some level.
Yeah, it's funny. The first part of a client engagement always kind of feels like a detective investigation where you're just asking a ton of questions, trying to figure out who's involved and who's sending data, who's pulling data and all that stuff. But, it's fun. It's part of the fun side of it too, where, this has never just been numbers in a spreadsheet to me. I mean, it's always about finding solutions for people who are really like struggling to make their computers do the things that they want them to do. And, at the end of the day, I think you and I could both kind of relate to this, that we're helping people at the end of the day work with technology. And that's something that, I definitely feel good about.
And that's why we're all here, at the end of the day. And as my final question for both of you, so if you could give one piece of advice to yourself a year ago, what would it be?
It's a good one.
That's a hard question. Okay, I'll answer two answers. One is that I shouldn't do the renovation. We did a renovation this year, and it was supposed to take 4 months, and it took 9 months. So it was a pretty painful 9 months. We were stuck with a 15-month-old. Now he's 15 months old, but like from a 6 to 15-month-old, trying to figure out where we were going to live for the past few months. That would definitely be one of them. We're happy that it's done, so maybe I wouldn't give that advice, but that was certainly like the hardest thing that I was dealing with for a little bit. But I think, probably the biggest thing would just be to give myself some insight around how this AI thing was going to play out and the biggest pieces to focus on. I think going into this year, one of the biggest things that I thought we were going to be focusing on was RAG, right? Like being able to generate RAG pipelines and being able to take the sources that we have and make them available for RAG. And I think I'm questioning that a little bit more and more now. That's something that I think we're doing, but I think the more valuable pieces are actually going to be around how AI can help users use our system as it is versus the other way around. And so that's something that it took us a really long time to get to, but and there's a lot of reasons for this. We could go into the gory details, but that's kind of the mindset now and what we're thinking about now.
I think for me, I'll just give a quick answer to this. I would tell myself to buy more RAM for my laptop because I kind of shortly after starting the business bought a new MacBook to kind of, usher in the new role. And I thought I was buying a lot of RAM at the time. I think I ended up with like 48 gigabytes of RAM on my laptop, which is like insane already. But now I'm learning as I'm kind of exploring LLMs and stuff, you can kind of run LLMs locally now. Like if you have an open source LLM, and I tried that and I sure enough hit my RAM limits. And now if you go to try to buy RAM anywhere for like a PC, it's probably double what it was a year ago. So there's my answer. I actually do have one more like quick last question here. Thinking about tools that you use, Dave, in your like day-to-day work, let's say, what's a data tool that you really like that you would recommend for people on the people listening to try out?
Good question. Well, we use Omni internally, and I think that's been pretty safe, but very very reliable and good tool. I would definitely say that that's probably one of the ones that I would suggest out there.
Nice. Yeah, we're friends of Omni as well over here. We're happy with what they're doing. For my answer to this, I would say it's all the new MCPs that are coming out, and Omni is actually on the list of tools that has a released one. But Mother Duck also has released one, and I've been experimenting with that in the past few days, and it's been really nice to just use language and get query responses back. It's kind of shocking how well it works already. So I think anyone who's listening to this, try to give that a shot.
That's definitely true. We have a basic one as well, but that was part of the reason that I think the RAG, the answer to the last question around RAG, is because just everyone's releasing an MCP, and companies are going to be very good about defining their own MCPs versus having a third party do it. So everyone's super incentivized to do that themselves.
Yeah.
All right. So we have hit the end of our episode. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on our anniversary episode. It's been incredible to have Estuary back on the show and just seeing how much has evolved in just a year. It's actually so insane. And to our listeners, thank you for an amazing year of Tycoon Talks. We're so excited for what's ahead. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it on your LinkedIn. And if people want to reach out and learn more about Estuary, should I link them to the website or to your LinkedIn? Do you have a shared Slack?
We have a shared Slack. You could come to our LinkedIn, the company LinkedIn. You could also email me personally at dave@estuary.dev.
Cool. So we'll link that all below in the description for you guys. And if you are looking to transform your data stack with Database Tycoon, go to our website that's also linked below and take our data maturity quiz. And if you're a tool looking to partner with a consultancy like us, you can just DM me directly on LinkedIn. I'll have that there below as well. So thank you, Dave and Steven, once again for another successful episode. And until next time, this is Tycoon Talks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.